In this final part of the series, we will look at how ETSI works with CEPT for equipment standardisation and spectrum management. CEPT is an organisation that brings policymakers and regulators from 46 countries across Europe together and was formed in 1959. Its Electronic Communications Committee, known as ECC, develops policy on electronic communications activities in a European context. ETSI coordinate with the European radio regulators in CEPT to develop and align national frequency regulations in parallel to developing standards for radio equipment. ETSI System Reference Documents, SR docs, describe spectrum needs associated with ETSI ENs for radio equipment. For every radio technology ETSI create a technical report, the SR doc. These are written within the ERM Technical Committee and contain a summary of the application with a simple technical description. Justified spectrum requirements with possible compatibility issues and market forecasts, including social and economic benefit. These can all be found on the ETSI website. An example is TR 103943, which provides a detailed background to the DECT 2020 new radio. Once the SR doc is completed, the ETSI liaison officer shares it with the relevant people in CEPT. The ETSI members then participate in spectrum sharing studies in CEPT project teams. Finally, regulatory conditions and spectrum sharing criteria are agreed and implemented in the harmonised standard and in frequency regulations. This process ensures that when the national administrations implement the regulation, it is aligned with the ETSI standards, which are then transposed into national standards by the NSOs. It is similar to the ENAP process that we saw in part 2 of this series. You might remember the SR-DAP process we saw in part 2 of the series. The European Commission can also issue a spectrum mandate to identify frequencies and technical conditions in support of EU policies. Whereas standardisation requests go to the ESOs, spectrum mandates are sent to CEPT. CEPT and ETSI then work together to form the spectrum sharing studies. ETSI can then create the SR doc and CEPT regulation under an ECC decision. The last step is for the European Commission to adopt a commissioning implementation decision after consulting with the Radio Spectrum Committee. Thanks to this process, manufacturers can access the market and equipment can use the spectrum with legal certainty in the 31 European and EFTA countries. In conclusion, for radio equipment, ETSI, CEPT and the European Commission work together with complementary roles. ETSI creates system reference documents which help CEPT perform sharing studies and create regulation. Sometimes this process is triggered by the European Commission with spectrum mandates, which leads to ETSI harmonised European norms. The end result is spectrum harmonisation, which creates a common single market for radio equipment across Europe. Thank you.